We've come to our main event. And boy, oh boy. I will say I skipped 10 plus minutes from the last bit of Charlotte and Ripley, and the main event still was not in the ring, because I was ready for this to be over. After I saw Charlotte and Rhea, because I knew what this was going to be like, and it did not surprise me. And I like both these guys very much like Bobby Lashley, and I like Drew McIntyre as talents. I like Bobby Lashley as a person. I've met Drew McIntyre a couple times. He was a very fine person, used his left to right turn indicator, but he's not a personal friend of mine, but I like him as a talent. But God damn it. Now, we've already seen a cage match. We've already seen girls bashing each other with weapons. Now we're going to have the second cage match of the night for one of the world championships, but not actually the big one, because that's Roman Reigns, and we got bait and switched out of his match on this show. So already, why did they put these guys in this position? We've had girls in your gimmick doing shit that you'll probably be doing something similar to earlier on the show, and we teased that the biggest star in our company will be defending the #1 title on this show, but we pull that off and put it on free TV so you guys close this thing. In the third time that we have seen you, at least in a major match, when Lashley has beaten you, Mr. McIntyre, flat in the middle, with really no excuse on the previous two occasions. I'm not envious of their spot here. Are you, Brian?
No, not at all.
Well, I just wanted to get you to chime in with that. They started on the floor and stayed there. And McIntyre beat Bobby Lashley all around ringside and bounced him off the cage. And then Lashley turned the tables and did the same thing. And then McIntyre hit him in the head with the steps twice. And then finally, after minutes, they get into the ring. Which is like if the German video started out with a rigorous fisting and ended up with sexy dancing. There was another kendo stick. Drew McIntyre got the kendo stick. Oops, girls did it. Not Simpsons, but the girls did it. And then McIntyre stops everything to set up a table on the outside of the ring. But Lashley was able to get MVP's Kane in through the cage. And it's no DQ. Why? Lazy booking. Remember when you didn't have to say, really, that a cage was no disqualification because it was just assumed that there would be no weapons in the cage, and that's part of the thing about the cage. You couldn't get weapons or outside interference in, and you couldn't get out, so it was two guys hand-to-hand and bashing each other off the steel until one settled the issue with the other.
That's right.
So did they ever say, cage match, no disqualification? Maybe Bob Loose. Why are you, what are you going to, you couldn't throw the guy over the top rope and get disqualified because Cage wouldn't let you.
It was the same thing as saying cage match. Nobody gets in, nobody gets out.
Yes.
It's obvious.
And here, and once again, another one of my brilliant ideas. Actually, it wasn't even my idea. It was just my suggestion for the first Hell in a Cell. I said, make the cage around the ring like that Lawler did in Memphis where Savage could come off the top with the double sledge out to the floor and still do his shit. And you had some room to fight around the ring on a limited basis.
Who do you make that suggestion to?
Who did I?
Yeah.
Vince.
Oh, he was receptive right off the bat?
Well,
because they had that one type of cage they used for, what, 10, 15 years?
Yes, and they sucked. The big blue cage that weighed 100,000 pounds.
Yeah.
And was expensive as fuck and would bust you open in a heartbeat if you looked at it sideways. Yes. We were discussing, and again, that was Undertaker and Michaels. It's going to be in a cage. That was the original thought, was a cage match. But it's a big pay-per-view, and we're trying to do things differently. And, the Attitude Era, Monday Night Wars, WCW. And especially since it was going to be the debut of Kane, and that was going to be Glenn Jacobs' big chance, and I like Glenn. I said, why don't we make it a bigger instead of just a cage match? And those, I even mentioned to Vince, I said, whether you know this or not, a large segment of the wrestling fans believes that the cage match should be no way in, no way out. And that's what they grew up on. I said, two things. Put the roof on it like the War Games, because that way people would know that there was no way to get in and no way to get out, right? Because that was good. To make the finish work where Kane appears, you have to have sold a situation where nobody can get in and nobody can get out. So it couldn't work for a standard WWF-style cage match. Put the roof on like the War Games, I said, and make the cage wider around the ring so they have room, because it's Michaels, right? So they have room to do their stuff like Lawler used to use in Memphis. And as that way, it's a bigger structure, and it's more. There's more sizzle to it than just the same old cage they've already seen. And of course, I'm thinking about the War Game spots. They're building a dome of steel in Atlanta. Say you're going to see a structure like you've never seen before. Say it's the ultimate score settler, and that there's literally no way in and no way out for anybody unless the match comes to a conclusion, because then the whole idea of Kane coming out, well, how's he going to get in? When he rips the door off the impenetrable cage, that gets over. If he'd opened the door of a regular WWF-style cage match, the referees did that in every match multiple times, right? Wouldn't make a big fucking deal. So we changed the presentation in part specifically to make the finish more impactful. But then you also had a gimmick match that you could use ongoing, and then, of course, then you could overuse and then prostitute. And the first time I saw him where they had the fucking guy with the lever that lifts the cage and drops it from the ceiling and lifts it up on the payroll, I was like, well, they've fucked this one now too. But originally that was the idea for the Hell in a Cell, and that's where all those things came from. And as I've mentioned, I researched Kane ripping the door off the cage, which Vince liked. To answer your question, he liked these ideas because of the way that I just explained it to you. It made sense. And the Kane ripping the door off the cage was a reverse of Doug Furnas as a babyface doing that in Knoxville in Continental Wrestling when Kevin Sullivan was booking down there and introduced him as a hometown hero. He was the big babyface and came to the other babyface's rescue because the world's strongest man pulled the door off. Well, in this case, this fucking brother of The Undertaker and this evil supernatural motherfucker ripped the door off and dropped The Undertaker on his head. But anyway, now they got kendo sticks and fucking stairs, and back to McIntyre and Lashley. It's a hat on a hat. There's so many gimmicks, and they're on the floor constantly. And I know there's no fans in the building yet, but they're getting in the habit of doing this. A lot of fans, even in these major arenas where there's bleacher seating and where instead of you just being in a flat independent show floor with seats on the floor, you've actually got escalated seating where you can look down on the ring. But still, for the people who paid the most for tickets, they want to see most of the fucking match happen in the ring where they can see it if they're past the second row of ringside instead of on the other side of the ring on a fucking floor. They get pissed. They pulled another table from under the ring and started setting that up. And I wrote, why won't this end? They've been on the floor forever. McIntyre threw Bobby back in the ring and tossed in 3 chairs after him, but did not try to hit Bobby Lashley with any of them. He wedged one of them between the ropes and the turnbuckles, or tried to. I don't think they ever used that again, and he dropped Lashley face first on the other one. So, again, you're trying to beat this fucking big, giant, shoot-fighting monster, and you've got him going. So when you roll him in the ring, instead of grabbing one chair, since we've already established that this could be done and nobody do anything about it, and just walking in and just baseball batting him over the top of the head and caving his skull in and beating him, you throw 3 chairs in the ring, You set one of them in the ropes, and then you lay one of them down flat on the mat and fucking pick the fucking big giant monster you're fighting up and drop him on the chair instead of just hitting him with a goddamn chair. And then they went back to the floor. And they hit each other with the stairs. And I swear to God, I started getting sleep. I wrote, I'm getting sleepy. And they were on the floor for so long that I dozed off, Brian. And when I woke up, McIntyre was beating up MVP and trying to rip his clothes off or something. And I'm like, was he in the cage all along is what I'm thinking to myself. I found out later on he wasn't. But then Bobby Lashley got the full Nelson and they crashed through a table, which has never been done before in wrestling. And then they got back in the ring and used more chair shots. Like McIntyre hit Lashley 5 or 6 times with the chair. Boom, 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 boom across the back. And within seconds, Bobby's back up and chokeslammed McIntyre off the apron through another table that was sitting there sideways. And you didn't see the entire landing. So I'm calling shenanigans. And I wrote at that point, this will not stop. Why won't they let it stop? And then Drew McIntyre finally was going for his kick when MVP recovered from his ass kicking and grabbed his leg. And he turned around and Lashley rolled him up 1, 2, 3. That was a spot show finish when I broke in Tennessee. And they used it here on the pay-per-view, a cheap finish to an interminable match. And in the replays, I saw that during the point that I went to sleep because it was the same shit over and over for well over half an hour, the referee got bumped and the other referee had to get in the cage to take over. And that's how MVP got in the cage and then got beat up and then forgot about so that he could come back and cause the distraction and the fucking chase the cat that ate the rat that lived in the cell that Vince built. What'd you think of this match?
I didn't hate it as much as you did. They worked hard. Every match on the show had a horrible finish, so why should this match be any different? I am relieved that the stipulation is that McIntyre can't get a match against Lashley for the title again.
Ever.
Kind of happy about that. I think I've seen enough of these two. I'm ready for them each to do something else.